My mission was to support the DMZ. And so that was what's for your audience, a demilitarized zone, meaning I was within 15 minutes of our enemy. And so being in that role was both high pressure. We make high performance the norm without sacrificing performance, profits, people, or peace, because sustainable success should not cost you your health. The more I learn, the more I understand I need to learn, because we don't know what we don't know. Take advantage of every opportunity in school, in high school, in college, in trade schools, whatever it is. If you've got to go to YouTube University starting off, you need to do, never stop learning.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Career Education Learning Center podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Rivers. As we celebrate Military Appreciation Month in the month of May, I am honored and distinguished to have on our show today Dr. LaWanda Holloman. She is a retired colonel of the U.S. Army. How are you doing today, Dr. Holloman?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am fine. And also, ladies and gentlemen, she is also an author of the book, The Invisible Advantage. So not only is she a retired colonel, but now after her retirement, she becomes an author. Ain't that great? And you definitely have to go into that. But let's start off with this, Dr. Holloman. Of all the military branches you could have gone into, you went into the Army, which I was in the Army Reserve. But why did you choose the Army rather than any other service?
That's a great question. First of all, let me just thank you for having me here today. Man, that's a great question. My dad served in the Army. And when I was in college, like any kid, I wanted to have some things. And so service was already familiar to me. But one of the things my parents taught me was if there is a problem, there is a solution. And so being that they had 3 kids, and oftentimes there's not enough money to fulfill all the requirements or wants that we had. And so I was just grateful that they allowed me to go to, were helping me go to college. And so I was trying to find a solution. And as I took the ASVAB test and everything, and my dad and I went out to visit some of the local areas. I was in South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, and I thought, oh, well, I'll go into the Air National Guard. But when we visited there was an interesting statement, like, you scored pretty high for a gal, and yeah, my dad was like, are you sure? Let's look at some other options too. Mm-hmm. So after deeper conversations, I went into the Army, and I would not have had it any other way. I'm so grateful. I believe that decision shaped my life in ways that I could not fully see at that time. But thank God for his wisdom. And I went into the Army. The Army gave me structure. It gave me discipline, although my parents were great disciplinarians. It's a funny story about that is at my retirement, my one of my high school assistant principals was at my retirement, and my ROTC sergeant major was there. And I said to my assistant principal, I said, you're here just to see that it's really me. For a while. And then for my Sergeant Major Marshall, he stood up and he said, I have to tell your parents up front, you made them strong. She came with these principles. She came with discipline, but we made her Army strong. And it was just funny because he's like, she came strong. I'll give you that. But we made her Army strong. And so all of that leadership experience and exposure to the environments that challenged me to grow beyond what I thought or even could have imagined. It taught me how to lead under pressure, which was one of the major things that I talk about in the book, and how to make decisions through situations where things seem uncertain. And then how to work with people from around the globe. Even growing up as a military child, I grew up on Fort Jackson. The school no longer there. It's called Hood Street. It was Hood Street Elementary. That's the school that I went to in Columbia, South Carolina. And so, yeah, I grew up a military brat and now a retired colonel from the United States Army. So, yeah.
Well, for full disclosure, I did my basic training because, LaWanda, I was in the Army Reserve. So I did my basic training at Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina. And so I was at Tank Hill. There's a U at Tank Hill, Fort Jackson. And they scared the living daylights out of me in the first couple of days. They scared the living daylights out of me.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I know exactly where Tank Hill is. I don't know if you remember Hilton Field.
Yes.
I used to live in Terrell Court, which is directly across the street from there. So,
oh my goodness, you were that close. Wow, I've never been close to the base.
I grew up on Fort Jackson and went to elementary school there. So, but yeah, looking back, I believe the decision for me to go in the military, it shaped my life in ways, I'm telling you, where you get to recognize that growth often happens when you step into something that is bigger than yourself. Yeah. So if you can imagine how many people come in and out, and all of victory starts here. That's the slogan at Fort Jackson. You probably remember that. And for me, it was also when I retired, victory transitioned here because we move into something else. We don't just retire because the life of a servant continues to serve. It just looks different. How we serve shows up differently. But once a soldier, always a soldier, right?
Right. And you have debunked many of my questions I was going to have. One is family support, because obviously you had family support. But one thing about that is that I seen that from talking to you is that your dad didn't force you to go in the Army. He didn't say Army or nothing. He allowed you to go to visit the Air National Guard, to make your own decision. How important was that to you that your father gave you that opportunity to say, go your own path?
Yeah, I think it was very important. He had nothing to do with me inquiring about it, right? It was, I had a problem, and based on how I grew up, if you have a problem, you got to think through solutions.
Right.
What are the next steps? What can you do about it? I'm in college and I need to be able to work to help, thank God for my parents who I had a brother and a sister. So it's three of us, and they were doing everything they could to ensure that we had a good quality of life. And I did. I just wanted to have spending money, and I knew that I needed a solution to do that. Right. So I needed a job. How can I have a job without a car? And so kind of going back through those steps, it was like, you know what? The Army Reserves. I can do the Army Reserves. So that's what I did. That's why I started as an E3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I started as an E3. And the reason is I was in college, and then I ended up bumping into a guy who was in college, and he was like, you're in college? Do you know that you could actually become simultaneous an officer because you're already in college? You can get in ROTC. So I got into what's called the simultaneous membership program, where I could be in the reserves and in ROTC at the same time. So I was then considered a cadet because I had done regular basic training, right? And so at the end of my when I graduated from college, I got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army, and that's when I went on active duty. spent time on active duty. My first assignment was in Korea. But anyway,
nice. That's good. We want to hear. That's what we're here for. So tell us about your career. That was one of the questions I always ask military people, because one of the things that I want young people to know is that you do travel. And so in your first assignment was in Korea. Tell us a little bit about Korea. That experience.
Yeah, Korea, it was an interesting place, an interesting assignment, at least for me back in the early 90s, right? I think I got there in 1990. I graduated from college in 89. But let me tell you this. While I was in college, I went to airborne school. We had to, in our ROTC program, they got so many slots for students to go, cadets to go to airborne school. But in ours, you had to compete. So I won, and we didn't have that many females. So I ended up going to airborne school while I was in college. Wow. And I enrolled because I went to an all-girls school, and they didn't have ROTC, so I was cross-enrolled. I graduated from Columbia College, and I was cross-enrolled at the University of South Carolina. And so I ended up getting to go to airborne school while I was in college because I won the physical fitness test challenge. Now, don't try to challenge me today, right? Oh, that was so many years ago. We celebrated our 40th high school anniversary this past year. So, but yeah, so Korea was a very interesting assignment in that at the time I was assigned to 2nd Infantry Division, and where I went, I was the first female officer in the area. So what's called AFK and News came and did an interview of me, like, how does it feel to be the first female officer, And somebody from Fort Jackson, who was a drill sergeant, when I was in basic training, he was my sister's drill sergeant.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so he saw me on AFK and News and contacted me. So that was pretty cool. All the way in Korea. He saw that. He was stationed there at another location. And I felt like, my God, how cool is that, Lord, that you would have somebody that I would actually know because I went to my sister's graduation, So, yeah, it was interesting because there weren't many females, actually not any until I got female officers until I got there. And so after that, more came. But people were coming from the surrounding areas to see, who is this female officer up here? But my first assignment, I was the technical supply officer, and I was responsible for over 3,200 line items of equipment to ensure that our maintenance office had what they needed, and the areas that we supported had what they needed to ensure equipment would function as it needed to if they needed a part. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was a supply clerk, so you know what, we have a lot in common there. Yeah. I know when I went to and my husband, I went to Desert Storm in 1991, and I think being in that country, in the Arab area, they were surprised to see that we had women truck drivers.
Right.
It shocked them that women could drive one and one drive a truck. Right. And so that was shocking to them, how much women can do. And I was going to ask you that question, but you've already answered that. You really adjust and say, hey, I'm a woman, but I can do this job here. So did you do any other duties overseas after Korea?
Of course, yes. So I've been to the Middle East, various locations around the globe. I'm a retired logistics officer. If you and because you are supply related, if you go to the museum in Virginia, you can pull up my information as a distinguished member of the Corps, of the Quartermaster Corps. So they have my bio in there. But I've been in other contingencies. We went in 91. I went to do some cleanup work after Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Then I've been back and forth to the Middle East during Operation Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, Noble Eagle. So I've spent quite a bit of time in the Middle East, but various other places traveling as a liaison in support of the Army Reserve Command. And then following that, I was at Forces Command.
So what did you enjoy most about military? I mean, what did you get out of military?
Yeah, I enjoyed meeting people from around the globe, whether I was in Kuwait or, I don't know if I should be naming names, but anyway, whether I was in the Middle East or any other place around the globe, no one ever got upset with me for respecting them and honoring them. And so I was able to understand a little bit more about people's cultures, and that helped my perspective. In Korea, we had what were called KATUSAs, Korean augmentees to the United States Army, that we got to work alongside. And so that helped me understand the culture a little bit better and to look outside of a lens that I had, and just appreciate that people's difference is what makes the difference. Even when it's hard to understand it, sometimes it's nice to be around different cultures so that you can learn a little bit more. So I'm grateful to gain that wisdom and shift in perspectives in order to, one, honor the dignity of humanity. God loves people, and he loves people. And so, but there are a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of different perspectives. And so it helps you to gain clarity around your own values and your value systems and what you will stand for and the things that you also stand against. And so that helped me a lot.
Yeah, and that's the things I want my young audience to know is that, one thing about the military, and you mentioned Kuwait, but I mean, I had friends that tell me they've been to Italy, Japan. I mean, you go all over the globe, get to travel, and they did get that same perspective that you did. And when they came out and they have a different perspective of the world, and it really enlightens you, especially being here from the United States, that there are other parts of the world that may have different perspective, but overall, we're all the same, right? We're all loving people who want the best for our family and for our country. And that's one thing I want young people to get from this interview. Now, in addition to what you like most, there's also some challenges. Especially being a female. What were some of the challenges you had to overcome where people can treat you as a regular officer and not just seeing you as a female?
Right. Because during the time that I went in and then going into the assignments that I've been in, it definitely influenced my desire. I have 2 daughters, to have them come. So I was able to take them into Korea. They've been to Hawaii. We've been to London. We've been to China. We've, into Japan and a lot of other places, London. And, one of the reasons I really wanted to do that is learning how to lead confidently.
Right.
Confidently in environments that didn't have as many females in it, particularly in leadership positions. But to do that with the strength of character that helped others understand that, yes, I am to be taken seriously. And so early on in my career, there were moments where I felt like I had to prove that I belonged in the room.
Right.
And that I could lead effectively and that I could perform at high levels under pressure. Because, right around that 91 time frame, of course, Desert Shield was going on, right? My mission was to support the DMZ mission. Right. And so that was what's for your audience, a demilitarized zone, meaning I was within 15 minutes of our enemy. And so being in that role was both high pressure.
Yes, very high pressure.
Could be volatile, right?
And challenging and rewarding once you came out of that and you stayed there. The growth comes from sometimes being the challenges. And only when you're challenged do growth come from that challenge.
Exactly.
And that's what I want our young people to understand, that, being uncomfortable or being challenged only can result in growth. But when you're going through it, you don't see it.
Exactly. And so what it helped me to do, though, in the middle of it, because you learn you've been through basic training. There are things that you learn here. And then for me going through ROTC, there are things that you learn there as well in your training. But in being in that situation, and of course, the foundation that I had from my own home training, and the values, instead of allowing those experiences to discourage me, they taught me the importance of preparation.
Yes.
You remember in college, hey, I had a problem. I needed money to be able to kind of do some of the things I wanted to do. Got to find a solution. So I went with that mentality. And then, so learning to be prepared, learning to be emotionally in tuned, and then adapting and being consistent. If I failed, but I got up and I kept going, I learned. And so, not being afraid to fail. Hindsight, don't just act recklessly, but be willing to take, risk.
And so that's a good segue. So with that risk, you became an author. Did your experience in the military is one of the reasons why you decided to write a book? Yeah.
So part of the inspiration behind it is when I retired from the military, some of my friends who went to work with different organizations would say, hey, can you come help with this, or can you speak here and speak there? And so I would just go out and do that. And what I kept hearing from the CEOs, the senior leaders, as I was attending these HR conferences and going into, various different, whether it was in a government setting, corporate setting, academic setting, even military settings, right? I just spoke at a military readiness division recently. But going in, there is not in the military so much, but in like corporate and other businesses, we can't find leaders. And so prayerfully, I had already had this framework that I had been working with people knew me. I was working them through that framework that I created. And when I finished my PhD, which was the perception of emotional intelligence on organizational performance among field grade officers in the United States Army Reserve Command. And I studied battalion commanders. And in that research, I discovered some really insightful things. And so it helped me to refine the framework that I had created. And so I wrote the book, The Invisible Advantage, and it was the culmination of my academic research, the refining of how I viewed leadership, but also the experiential knowledge of leading from the ground up, and just the experiential nature of being out here working with others and the challenges that they had. And so the book addresses the full spectrum of leaders. And the work that I currently do primarily, though, is with executives and senior leaders, because I believe that culture is set from the top down, but it's implemented from the bottom up. And the system, I work at a systems level to help ensure that the conditions are set for success, and so that people can thrive. So we look at the invisible drivers of leadership at a systemic level that help make high performance the norm for leaders, teams, and the culture. So that's the work that I'm currently doing now.
Well, that is great. And I mentioned to Dr. Holloman earlier that I'm about to have her back and go over her book with her. And so she can really go into details for people who want to learn about leadership and learn about high performance. So, Dr. Holloman, before we close out this podcast, do you have any words of wisdom or suggestions for our young people?
Yeah, I would say at Design High Performance, which I'm the founder and lead consultant for, we make high performance the norm without sacrificing performance, profits, people, or peace, because sustainable success should not cost you your health, your relationships, or clarity. So what I would tell any young person, enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey. Learn all you can while you are, and I would say learning never stops, right? I'm 59. I graduated in 2024 with a PhD. I graduated from the Army War College while I was on active duty. I got a master's in strategic study. While I was on active duty, I got an MBA from Liberty University. Of course, I went to Columbia College and the University of South Carolina. And guess what? I'm still learning. So the more I learn, the more I understand I need to learn, because we don't know what we don't know. So take advantage of every opportunity in school, in high school, in college, in trade schools, whatever it is. If you've got to go to YouTube University starting off, you need to do, never stop learning. Never learning.
Well, you heard here from Dr. LaWanda Joseph Holloman. Never stop learning. And ladies and gentlemen, and my young people, never stop learning. As one of my mentors said, you won't stop learning till the day you die, because you always should be in constant mode of learning. Thank you so much, Dr. Holloman, for coming on our show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. God bless you and have an amazing day.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining me, Mitchell Rivers, on another outstanding episode of the Career Education Learners in a Podcast, where we're making your career dreams a reality. God bless.